Greetings, Wandering Beekeeper here. Welcome to Sake Making in the Chinjufu mod. It's a woodland mansion. Yes, this is a peaceful world, so I was able to move in and hermit crab my way around. We are going to work our way through the entire process of making sake, which is lengthy. This is a very realistic mod. It's put together by brilliant and very detail-oriented Japanese developer. Really recommend delving into it. It goes into an awful lot of stuff. To check a couple of things. We are going to start by making water bottles because we need water bottles. So let's go fill some water. There we go. Plenty. Alrighty, we'll stash these. Sulfone. So that I can use the portable crafting grid. And we will make our yeast culture bottles because I need to make yeast culture bottles to replace these. If you look up the recipe for the yeast culture bottle in JEI, it will give you some weirdness with an uncraftable potion. Don't worry about that. All you need is a water bottle, apple, and a sugar. There's our yeast culture bottle. 1, 2, 6, 7, 10. I'm not sure. And there we go. Now, we now have 10 bottles. I'm going to knock these down. Collect them. Their position above the komekouji shelves is just for convenience. The two are not related to each other. Now these are yeast. These are culture bottles. Stick the culture bottles up on the wall, on a shelf, or on the ceiling, or wherever turns you on. And they're kind of an opaque white. Eventually, they become yeast culture. They become yeast itself, which is a bit more transparent, a bit easier to see through. It's a subtle difference. This mod is all about subtle differences in texture maps. So we've made yeast. We have yeast ready to go. Put away the bottles. And then we will collect our komekouji, because we have to have rice malt in order to do this. These are completed komekouji shells. Easiest thing to do is just to break them, because you can right-click collect. We want to rebuild them. So I'm going to huck all of that into there. And then we are going to build new komekouji shelves. There's a mushroom, a steamed rice, 4-cloth, and a fermentation barrel. Fermentation barrel requires oak, requires planks, slab, and a mushroom. And it's rather specific. It does want oak. Sake is particular. So, to those is an empty bowl. Reload. There's another steamed rice. And another. Remember in the last video when I made all that steamed rice, when I made 6 steamed rice and talked about how you're going to need an awful lot of it? Yeah, well, we just went through 5 steamed rice just to make new komekouji shells. Can't right-click it. Too early to collect. You'll see that a lot in this mod. It's too early to collect. These things have to sit for a number of game ticks and age for the rice malt to develop. Once the rice malt has developed, you can then set up your first fermentation barrel. So we will make shubo barrels. Helps if I can spell shubo. A shubo barrel uses a yeast, which we just harvested, a komekouji, which we just harvested, a steamed rice, water, the fermentation barrel. You'd better have a lot of fermentation barrels built before you start making sake. You're going to need them. So we start making our shubo barrels. Each one uses a yeast, a komekouji, a steamed rice, a water, a fermentation barrel, and leaves behind an empty bowl, an empty bottle, an empty bucket. So you have to reset after the container issue. Let's work our way through making shubo barrels, crafting each one. Again, it is probably possible. I mean, this is just crafting. It could be done. Making the barrel could be auto-crafted. That could be possible. If you use maybe an hourglass timer from Botania and some way to break the barrels and collect them. Here we have the fermentation room. You haven't seen this before in this video series. This is where all the fermented products sit while they're working. Soy sauce down there, miso up there, cider, mead. Here I have rice vinegar, Chinese cabbage, and back here is sake. And down the floor are shubo barrels and moromi barrels, the 2 stages of fermentation. These barrels, you can tell by the ring on the top, have completed fermentation, so we're going to collect them. Now, to see, remember correctly, there we have a shubo. And you go down the line and collect with a bowl in world by hand. You see the barrels go lighter and the ring disappears, and now it's just a fermentation barrel. So we'll take our axe and cut these. Go collect those fermentation barrels. We now have 7 shubo and 7 empty barrels that we can now use for our next batch. And we're going to lay down the shubo barrels that we just made so that they can start fermenting. Go. Take our fermentation barrels, our shubo, and them away in the storage so that they're available for the crafting grid. It will take some time for these barrels to age and for them to be ready to be harvested. Once they are ready to be harvested, by golly, you ought to get an experience orb for harvesting a moromi barrel, as much as has gone into it. So there was a steamed rice in each of those. Let's collect these and make moromi barrels. There we go. And we now have 7 barrels to go in here. Here's 7 moromi. We'll hold on to that for right now, because we need to make new barrels. To make a moromi barrel, you need a steamed rice, a komekouji, and a shubo, and then water and a fermentation barrel. You will use brewing uses a terrific amount of water no matter what you're making. We have to have the shubo from the first fermentation, more komekouji, and more steamed rice, because by gosh, we are going to be ripping through the steamed rice. I spent a considerable amount of time setting up for this video by standing in the kitchen making steamed rice and making steamed rice and making steamed rice, and oh my gosh, we are short on komekouji, it seems. That is a little frustrating. Let us go check our komekouji shelves that we put out earlier today. See if they're ready. Nope. We are only making 5 moromi barrels because apparently I didn't harvest enough komekouji before starting this video, and I'm not reshooting this video. We have 5 moromi barrels. There we go. 5 second stage fermentation barrels. Now we go back to the kitchen, because we have a couple more processes to do. We now have 7 moromi. And we are going to take our moromi and put it on the crafting grid. I don't remember. We craft it with a help if I remembered. There we go, wine bottles. Got it. So, take the moromi, put it on the grid. We put it on the grid with empty wine bottles. These are made from glass. It's a very simple, it takes 3 blocks of glass. You make a wine bottle. Very simple. And we process our moromi, and we get sake cake, and we get pure sake. You could drink it at this point. It would be aviation fuel. Let us put this away. So, I've made a lot of sake, yes. We want aged sake, the good stuff. So we go to our stove, and it makes a happy little noise. And we drop our pure sake in it, and we are going to distill it. Distilling the pure sake makes blue bottle sake. And we'll give it just a moment for the 7 bottles to process. You can do this in accelerated furnaces. This particular part could be auto-crafted. There are points where you could accelerate or auto-craft, but I'm not sure how you'd automate collecting with bowls from the fermentation barrels. Really, I've given this some thought. If anybody watching has ideas on how to automate this process, let me know. So we now have 7 bottles of sake. We are going to find our fermentation barrels, and we are going to take all 7 bottles, and we are going to put them in barrels to age. And then we're going to go around the back. Back to the fermentation room, where we have our sake aging. Now you can't see it on these barrels, but there is a little O on top. Been here long enough. And if I just right-click with an empty hand, right-click with an empty hand is important in this mod. You will collect a lot of stuff with an empty hand. Whoops. Cut that one without collecting it first and left a bottle of sake floating there. Shame on me. Okay. Put that barrel aside. Chinjufu wants you to do a lot of collection with an empty hand. And yes, we do get experience orbs for those sakes. As much effort as went into them, here you can see there's the O on top. So you can tell that this is matured. And I'm just going to go through, lay in barrels that we just created. And we can see that there is a subtle difference in the coloration. They are a little lighter. Mature barrels are a little darker. It's pretty subtle. You'll learn to spot those subtle textural differences. And now we have 7 bottles of aged sake. I set one out on a counter. Go. And get a glass. It's part of a set. Let me see. I've got drink glasses over here. There we are. Oh, and notice that our fire in our Aurori has burned out, and if we collect it with an empty hand, we get a bone meal. Waste not, want not. And in a peaceful world, bone meal is a little more difficult to come by. So, right-click, take our drink glass, right-click our sake bottle. We now have a glass of sake. And here's to you. Ooh, potion effect. Strength and slowness seems appropriate. That is sake making from Eddie to enjoyment. I am the one beekeeper. Thank you for joining me.